The kettle has already gone quiet. There is a kind of silence that only shows up after something has been boiling for a while, the exact second the sound stops and the room seems to lean forward to check if it's really over. You didn't hear the last bubble. Nobody ever does. And here is the thing nobody tells you. The water in that kettle, right now, cooling on the counter, is, in the only way physics actually knows how to describe it, not later than the water that was boiling. It is just arranged differently. There is no page being turned between the two. If that sentence bothers you a little, good, it should. Some part of you has spent your whole life assuming there's a hallway between now and a minute ago, and there might not be one, and you are about to spend the next while finding out what it feels like to walk down a hallway that was maybe never there. You know that feeling of reaching for a moment right after it happens, the last note of a song, the tail end of someone's laugh, and finding your hand closes on nothing. Not because the moment is far away, because it was never the kind of thing you could hold in the first place. Most people call this time passing. Almost nobody stops to ask what passing would even mean. Physically, mechanically, the way you'd ask what a hinge is doing when a door swings. We are going to ask that, slowly. Possibly without a satisfying answer at the end, and I want to be honest about that now instead of pretending toward one later. Start with the kettle, because it's small, and it's ordinary, and ordinary things are where the strange stuff hides best. Water heats. Molecules move faster, collide harder, until enough of them have enough energy to become steam and leave. Then the heat source is gone, and the water starts giving that energy back to the room, slower, quieter, until it settles at whatever temperature the kitchen happens to be. That's the whole story, as far as the water is concerned. Hot version, cooler version, cooler version again. Nowhere in that description is there a little arrow that says, and this is the forward direction. The physics doesn't add one, we do. That's worth sitting with for a second, because it's the seam this whole idea splits open from. Every law we have for how small things bump into each other, how a particle moves, how energy hands itself from one place to another, every single one of those laws works exactly as well if you play it backward. Run the film of 2 billiard balls colliding in reverse and it still looks like physics. Nothing in the equation objects. Nothing says, wait, that's not allowed. The rule that says spilled milk doesn't unspill, that cracked eggs don't reassemble, that the tea doesn't uncool itself back into a boil. That rule shows up somewhere else, not in the moving parts, in how many ways there are for them to be arranged. Here's the part that's actually kind of eerie, if you let it be. An egg has exactly one way of being whole. It has an enormous, almost stupid number of ways of being broken, scattered, splattered, in this bit of shell over here, that bit of yolk over there. So when it breaks, it isn't obeying some cosmic law that says things must decay. It's just doing the thing that has vastly, overwhelmingly more ways of happening. Order is rare. Mess is common. That's it. That's the whole secret sitting underneath what you've been calling time going forward your entire life. It isn't a force pushing you into tomorrow. It's a coin with about 1 trillion tails and 1 heads, and you keep landing on tails, and you've been calling the pattern of landings a river, when it might just be a pile. I don't know if that's supposed to be comforting or the opposite. Some nights it feels like both, in the same breath, and I'm not going to pretend I've landed on which one it actually is. Sit with the kettle a little longer. Right now, this exact instant, try to actually catch it. Not the second before, not the second after. This one. You'll notice something strange happens the moment you try. By the time you've registered that you're in now, the now you registered has already become one of the seconds behind you. It's like trying to look directly at your own eye without a mirror. The present tense keeps sliding out of reach of the sentence describing it. Physicists have run into this same wall from the other direction, mathematically, and they haven't found a door in it either. There is no equation, none, anywhere in modern physics that contains a term for right now, the way your body insists on believing in one. The deepest descriptions of reality we have simply do not include a present moment as a special privileged thing. They include a structure, every moment, all at once, existing the way every mile marker on a highway exists at once, whether or not a car happens to be sitting on it. That's not a metaphor I'm going to ask you to fully accept tonight. It's just one that some very careful, very serious people have looked at the evidence and ended up standing inside of. Uncomfortably, the way you might stand in a house you're not sure you believe is haunted, but you also don't want to turn the lights off in it. Here's a stranger piece still. 2 clocks. One sitting on a table near you right now, one sitting on a mountain, or in orbit, or on a very fast train. It doesn't matter which, will not agree with each other about how much time has gone by. Not because one is broken, both are working exactly correctly. Gravity itself, according to everything we've tested and confirmed and rebuilt satellites around, bends the rate at which later arrives. Closer to a large mass, later arrives more slowly. This isn't theoretical in the sense of untested. It's accounted for every day in the GPS satellite quietly correcting itself over your head so your phone doesn't drift into telling you you're standing in the wrong street. The ground under the whole idea of a single shared now isn't solid. It was never solid. We just built our entire emotional vocabulary before, after, ago, soon. On top of it anyway. The way a town builds streets on a floodplain because the floodplain is flat and convenient and nobody wants to think about the river. I keep circling back to the kettle because I don't fully trust myself to leave it. There's something almost embarrassing about how much weight we put on a feeling. The feeling of time moving, when the feeling itself might be doing more work than the reality underneath it. Your memory of the water boiling is a pattern sitting in your skull at this exact moment, no more physically connected to the actual boiling than a photograph is connected to the room it was taken in. The photograph doesn't reach backward to touch the moment it shows you. It just sits there, in your present, being a pattern that resembles something. Maybe memory is the same trick wearing a better costume. None of this means nothing happened. The water was hot, now it isn't. Something occurred. I want to be careful not to let this slide into the water as not real. Isn't that wild? That's not where this is going, and it's not true, and I don't think it's honest to pretend otherwise for the sake of a bigger chill down your spine. What's actually being asked here is smaller and somehow stranger than that. Not whether things happen, but whether happening requires a river running underneath it at all, or whether it's closer to a very, very long book, already fully written, and you're simply the part of the book that is currently being read. I don't know which one is true. I want to say that plainly, once, before we go any further. because it would be dishonest to walk you through the next several hours pretending toward an answer I don't have. What I do know is that the water is cool now, the kettle is quiet, and somewhere in the gap between the boiling and the quiet, something that felt like a passage happened to you, whether or not physics agrees there was a passage there to feel. If you've ever laid in bed at 2 a.m. and had a memory arrive so completely, so physically, that for half a second you weren't sure if you were remembering it or still inside it, that's the thing this whole chapter has been circling without landing on. I don't have a name for it. I'm not sure anyone does. Let the kettle sit there a while longer. We're not done with it. We're just going to leave it quiet for now. Expand remaining chapters. Orchestrated distinct narrative mechanics while balancing structural variety and manageable scope. Orchestrated distinct narrative mechanics while balancing structural variety and manageable scope. A clock is just a thing that repeats. Somewhere in a drawer a metronome is about to be wound, and the second before the key turns is the last second in which nothing in that room is pretending to measure anything. A clock does not know what time is. It has never claimed to. What it knows, the only thing it has ever known, is how to do one small motion over and over at what we've agreed is a reliable pace. A pendulum swinging its short arc, a quartz crystal shuddering at a fixed number of times per second, the specific decay of a cesium atom ticking along so consistently that we eventually decided to define the second itself by it. That's the whole trick. Repetition counted. Nothing about a swinging weight has any opinion on the nature of the universe it's swinging inside of. I used to find this comforting in a childish way. The idea that somewhere underneath all our appointments and deadlines and the low hum of running late, there was a machine doing something honest and mechanical, untouched by the mess of human worry. It took a while to notice the quieter, less comforting version sitting right behind that one. If a clock is just a repeating motion, and every repeating motion can, in principle, run at a different rate depending on where it is and how fast it's moving, then the number on your wrist was never really measuring a river called time. It was measuring itself, and hoping the rest of the world agreed to measure along with it. Consider what it took to get everyone to agree in the first place. Before railways, a town simply set its clocks by the sun directly overhead. Noon was noon when the sun said so locally, and the next town 15 miles east had a noon of its own, slightly earlier, and nobody minded because nobody needed to be anywhere fast enough for the difference to matter. Then trains arrived, moving faster than the old disagreement could survive, and someone somewhere had to draw invisible lines across the land and declare that everyone inside a given line would now share one official noon, whether or not the actual sun agreed. Time zones aren't a discovery, they're a truce. That's worth sitting with for a moment. A truce, not a fact. We built towers with faces on all four sides so an entire town could look up and settle on the same story. The tower doesn't know anything the sundial in the courtyard didn't already know. It's just louder, and everyone can see it at once. And seeing the same number together felt apparently close enough to truth that nobody pushed the question further for a couple 100 years. Push it now, though, and something stranger comes loose underneath it. Every clock we've ever built, sundial, pendulum, spring, quartz, atomic, is a local event, happening in one specific place, at one specific rate, that we then hold up against a shared standard and adjust for. And shared standard has always been doing more heavy lifting than it looks like it's doing. Two atomic clocks synchronized down to the billionth of a second will drift apart from each other if you put one on a plane and leave one on the ground. Not because either one is malfunctioning, because the ground and the sky above it are not, in any strict sense, the same place for time to happen in. I keep circling back to the metronome, the one from the start of this, sitting in its drawer with its key half turned. It will keep whatever rhythm it's built for once it's wound. It has no way of knowing that the rhythm it's about to keep is not a universal fact being reported, but a local habit being repeated, faithfully, in one particular corner of a much larger and much less orderly situation. That's not a flaw in the metronome, it's just the whole nature of the instrument. Every clock is a metronome, every metronome is local, and every agreement between two clocks, anywhere, at any distance, is a small act of diplomacy dressed up as a measurement. None of this means the ticking is fake. Something really is happening, each time the pendulum swings, each time the quartz shudders. What's less clear, and this is the part that took me the longest to actually let sit instead of resolve, is whether that ticking is counting something called time, or whether it simply is a thing happening, one of countless things happening, and we decided somewhere far back to use it as the ruler for all the others. A ruler is useful. A ruler is not the same as the thing it measures. There is a metronome somewhere, mid-swing right now, doing exactly what it was built to do, entirely unaware that the thing it's counting might not be the thing we've been telling it it's counting. Nobody has found the present. Somewhere inside your eye, right now, light that left its source a fraction of a second ago is landing on a patch of cells. Not this instant, a little before it. Your brain is stitching that slight delay into something it calls seeing now. It has been doing this your whole life. You've never once caught it in the act. This is called the specious present, that name, once, and then let it go. It's not a clean fact, it's more of a shape your brain makes out of a handful of delayed signals, glued together well enough that you never feel the seam. Try it directly. Try to point with your attention at the actual instant you are in, not the sound a second ago, not the thought forming right after this one. This one, right here, it slips. Every time you try to hold it, the holding takes time, and the thing you were holding has already become something slightly behind you. It's a strange kind of chase, not because the present is fast, but because trying to catch it requires you to stand still relative to something that has no stillness to offer. Physics has had the same experience from a colder angle. Go looking for now in the equations that describe how particles move, how fields ripple, how the universe as a whole behaves. You won't find a term for it. Not a missing piece waiting to be discovered. Just an absence, structural, the way a sentence about colour has no term for silence. The mathematics describes relationships between moments. It has never once needed a moment to be the special one. Here's where it gets strange enough that I want to slow down and say it carefully, because it's easy to slide past. Two observers, moving differently relative to each other, can disagree, genuinely, provably, not as an illusion, about which of two distant events happened first. Not because either one saw it wrong. Because first isn't a fixed fact sitting out there in the universe, available equally to everyone. It depends on how you're moving, which means now the thing you're standing in as you read this is not a shared floor everyone in the universe is standing on together. It's closer to our angle of view. Different observers, different angles, different nows, and no umpire anywhere whose now counts more than anyone else's. Sit with that. Actually sit with it, because it deserves more than a nod. If two people, moving differently, can honestly disagree about which of two things came first, then whatever the present moment means, it isn't the single global fact your whole nervous system has been quietly assuming it is. Your body built you to believe in a now. It never asked physics for permission. I've read the equations. I've read the arguments on both sides. The uns who say the present is an illusion built by delayed neurons stitching together old light, and the ones who insist there's something more to it than that. Something not yet captured. I don't know who's right. I'm not sure the question has fully arrived yet, in physics or anywhere else. What I know is that the light landing in your eye right now is already a small memory by the time you notice it, and somehow that never stops you from believing you're looking at this instant directly, with nothing standing between you and it. Nobody has found the present, not the philosophers looking for it in experience, not the physicists looking for it in the math. It might be that everyone is searching a room for a light that was never left on, where physics stopped agreeing with you. Far from here, farther than any of this, there's a mountain with a lab bolted to its side, and inside that lab is a clock nobody has ever seen mentioned in a headline, quietly running a hair faster than its twin sitting in a basement at sea level. Start there, at that distance, because the distance matters before the detail does. Come closer. The lab is unremarkable. Cables, a hum of machinery, a technician who has stopped noticing the sound of it years ago. But the clock inside is one of the most precise instruments a human being has ever built, accurate to a billionth of a second, and even it cannot escape what's about to be described. Come closer still, past the casing into the mechanism itself, down to the vibrating atom at its core, ticking at a rate so specific that we chose it, decades ago, to define what a second even is. And here is the thing that atom cannot help but do. Up on the mountain, a little farther from the mass of the earth beneath it, that atom ticks very slightly faster than its counterpart down in the basement, closer to the ground. Not because the mountain clock is better built, because gravity itself, actual gravity, the same pull keeping your body in the chair you're in right now, bends the rate at which time passes, more strongly the closer you are to a large mass, more gently the farther away. This isn't a rounding error or a quirk of instruments. It is one of the most repeatedly confirmed predictions in the history of physics, verified in labs, verified in orbit, built directly into the correction code running on every GPS satellite over your head, silently adjusting itself so your phone doesn't drift into telling you you're standing in the wrong street entirely. I want to slow down here, because this is the part where the ground actually moves, and it deserves to be felt rather than rushed past. You have spent your entire life assuming that a minute is a minute, everywhere, for everyone, the way a mile is a mile whether you walk it uphill or down. That assumption is wrong, and not in some abstract theoretical footnote way. It is wrong in a measurable, testable, everyday way, the kind you're relying on right now without knowing it every time your phone finds your location. Sit in a chair on the ground floor of a building for a year, and someone living on the top floor of that same building will have aged by an infinitesimal but entirely real amount, slightly less than you. The difference is too small for a human body to feel. It is not too small for a clock to catch. Now go further still, down into the body doing the sitting, because this is where it stops being an abstraction about clocks and starts being about you specifically, breathing, existing, aging in a very particular place in a gravitational field that is bending, ever so slightly, how quickly your own cells are moving toward whatever is coming for them. Every heartbeat you have ever had has occurred at a rate shaped, in some infinitesimal fraction, by exactly how far you happen to be from the center of a large rock spinning through space. Move that heart closer to the rock, and it ticks marginally slower, aging marginally less. This is not poetry. This is what the equations, tested against reality again and again, actually say. There is no version of you that gets to opt out of this. There is no observer, anywhere, standing outside the gravitational field who gets to say what time it really is, independent of where they're standing. The whole architecture that felt so solid, one true clock, ticking the same for everyone, everywhere, the confident scaffolding of yesterday, today, tomorrow shared equally by every living thing, turns out to be exactly that, scaffolding, load-bearing enough to build a life on top of, not load-bearing enough to survive close inspection. I have read the equations more times than I can count, and there is still a moment, every time, where something in me resists them. Some old animal part that insists there must be one true clock somewhere, ticking the real time, and everything else is just measurement error around it. There isn't. There has never been one. There is only wherever you happen to be standing, and however fast you happen to be moving, and the particular way those two things bend just slightly, the rate at which the rest of the universe arrives for you. The mountain clock is still running a hair faster than the basement clock right now as you read this, and it will keep doing so for as long as both of them exist, and neither one is wrong. The block. You probably think of your life as a story being told to you one page at a time, the past behind you like pages already read, the future ahead like pages not yet turned. That's the assumption. Here's the interruption. There may be no turning at all. Picture instead every page already printed, bound, sitting there, complete, whether or not anyone is currently reading page 206. This is what some physicists mean when they talk about the block universe. Not a metaphor exactly, more like the plainest reading of the equations, taken at face value instead of softened for comfort. In this picture, your 5th birthday and this exact sentence, and whatever is going to happen to you next Tuesday, all exist with the same kind of permanence, laid out alongside each other rather than one replacing the other as it arrives. Nothing in the block is more real than anything else in it. Nothing is coming. Nothing is going. It simply is, all of it, at once. The way a film strip exists complete in its canister, whether or not it's currently running through a projector. Stand beside that idea for a moment rather than inside it, because it is genuinely difficult to stand inside for long. The reason serious physicists take this picture seriously, not as poetry, as a candidate for what's actually true, traces back to something we've already touched. The fact that two observers moving differently can honestly disagree about which of two events happened first. If before and after can shift depending on how fast you're moving, then there's no single universal river carrying events from future into present into past. There's just a landscape of events, all sitting in specific relationships to each other, and different observers slicing through that landscape at different angles, calling different slices now. If that's right, your birth and your death are not separated by a distance called time, in the way you separate two houses on the same street by a distance called space. They're just both present as a block, the way both ends of that street are present on a map, regardless of which end you happen to be standing on. I don't know how to feel about this, and I don't think you're supposed to arrive at a feeling quickly. Some physicists who spend their whole careers inside this equation say it changed nothing for them emotionally. A person they loved died, and the block didn't comfort them, because knowing a page still exists in a bound book doesn't mean you can turn back to it and be there again. Others say the opposite, that there's something steadying in the thought, that nothing is actually lost, only located somewhere you can no longer reach. There is a specific kind of vertigo that comes with taking this picture seriously even for a few minutes. The sense that the flow you felt every day of your life, the forward motion, the arrow, might not be a feature of the universe at all. It might be something added entirely by the particular kind of creature doing the noticing. And maybe that's not diminishment. Maybe the flow is real exactly where it needs to be real. In you, in the noticing, in the specific and strange fact that a pattern of matter arranged. The way you're arranged experiences the pages in order, one at a time, even if the book itself doesn't insist on it. Entropy is the only one keeping score. A drop of ink is spreading through a glass of water right now, somewhere, thinning as it goes, and it will not at any point gather itself back into a single dark bead no matter how long you wait. That's the whole chapter in a way. Everything else is just circling closer to why. The ink doesn't know it's spreading. It has no destination in mind. Each individual molecule of it is simply bumping into water molecules, getting knocked in whatever direction the collision sends it, over and over, with no memory of where it came from and no plan for where it's headed. And yet, the overall pattern, the drop thinning, spreading, disappearing into an even haze, happens with such reliability that we treat it as one of the surest things in the universe. Ink spreads, it does not ungather. Rooms get messier without deliberate effort. Eggs do not unbreak. If time has a direction at all, an actual arrow, not just a feeling. This might be the only place in physics where that arrow is written down plainly, not in the motion of any single particle, in the counting. Here's the part worth slowing all the way down for. A dropped egg, whole, has exactly one arrangement that counts as whole. A broken egg has an almost incomprehensibly large number of arrangements that count as broken. This shard here, that smear there, 1,000 slightly different configurations, all of which we'd look at and just say broken. So when the egg breaks, it isn't obeying some rule that says things must decay. It's doing the far more mundane thing, moving toward the condition that has vastly more ways of existing. Order is rare. Disorder is common, almost absurdly common, the way winning a lottery is rare and not winning it is common. except here the odds aren't in the thousands, they're in numbers with more zeros than anyone's ever bothered to write out fully. This tendency toward the more probable, the more scattered, the harder to reverse, is called entropy, and it increases reliably in any closed system, not because something is pushing it forward, but because there is simply more room in that direction, more ways to be messy than to be neat. That's it. That's the arrow. I find something almost unbearably plain about this, once you sit with it long enough. We have spent religions and poems and entire philosophies trying to explain why time moves forward, what force compels it, what it means that we age and don't unage, that we remember yesterday and not tomorrow. And one of physics's steadiest answers is essentially a numbers game, not fate, not a river. A coin with an almost incomprehensible number of tails and a small number of heads, landing on tails, over and over, and us calling the pattern of landings a direction. It should feel smaller than it does. Somehow, it doesn't. There is no law that says the universe started ordered. It simply seems to have an early state so improbably tidy, by every measure we can construct, that the room for things to get messier since then has been enormous, and the room for them to spontaneously get tidier again is, for all practical purposes, zero. We are living inside that long unwinding. Every clock you've ever trusted, every memory that feels like it's behind you rather than ahead, may be borrowing its whole sense of direction from that one improbable, unexplained fact about how tidy things happen to be at the very start. I don't know why the beginning was tidy. Nobody does. Not really. Not yet. The ink keeps spreading regardless. A second cousin of memory. You can describe in detail the argument you had this morning. You cannot describe at all the argument you're going to have tomorrow, because it hasn't happened, because it doesn't exist yet in any form your mind has access to. This feels like proof of something. It feels like the clearest evidence anyone could ask for. That time has a direction, a firm one, a compass needle pointing hard toward the past and refusing to budge toward the future no matter how you turn the case. I want to sit with that feeling a while before doing anything to it, because it's a good feeling, a convincing one, and it deserves the respect of being taken seriously before being taken apart. Here's the part that arrived late for me, and slowly, the way most unsettling things do. A memory, wherever it lives in you, some configuration of neurons, some pattern of connection strengthened by use, exists entirely in your present, right now, not connected to the actual morning argument by any thread reaching backward through time to touch it. It's a structure sitting in your skull in this exact moment, shaped like a record of something. The way a photograph is shaped like the room it was taken in. The photograph doesn't reach back into that room. It just sits in whatever present it's currently being looked at in, being a pattern that resembles a thing that once was. If that's true, and there's no serious reason to think it isn't, then the asymmetry you feel, the reason you remember yesterday and not tomorrow, might not be evidence of time flowing in one direction at all. It might just be a fact about which patterns happen to exist in you right now. You have patterns shaped like yesterday. You do not have patterns shaped like tomorrow, because tomorrow hasn't happened yet to leave one. That's a true and boring fact about causation and pattern formation. It is not, on its own, proof that something called time is flowing past you like a river. Slow down here, because this is the part that took the longest to actually sit still in. Entropy again, the ink, the egg, the messiness that only increases, turns out to be doing more of the work here than it looks like. A memory, physically, is a low-entropy structure. Information, organized, preserved. A specific and unlikely arrangement of neurons that took energy to build and would take energy to erase. It can only form in a direction that matches the direction entropy is already increasing, the same direction the ink is spreading, the same direction the egg is breaking. You remember the past and not the future for the same deep reason the ink doesn't ungather. Not because time itself has a favourite direction, because certain kinds of order can only be built downhill, entropically speaking, and memory is one of those kinds. That's strange to say out loud. Your memory, the thing that feels like the most personal, most human proof that time moves, turns out to be leaning on the exact same quiet numbers game as a cooling kettle and a spreading stain. I've turned this over more times than I can count. Some nights convinced it explains everything, other nights convinced it explains nothing at all, and I've just found a clever way to describe the mystery instead of solving it. I'm genuinely not sure which of those is closer to true. What I keep coming back to is this. You are, right now, a pattern shaped like a past you can describe in detail, and a future you cannot describe at all. And both of those facts are happening in the same present moment, at the same time, in the same head. What the equations never needed. There's a moment right before a physicist writes down an equation for how a ball falls, or a planet orbits, or a radioactive atom decays, where they have to choose something without realizing they're choosing it. And that choice is at the center of everything this chapter is about to unfold. Write the equation for a falling ball. It says, given this position and this speed, here is where the ball will be an instant later. Now run that same equation backward. Feed it the ball's final position and speed, and ask it to tell you where the ball was an instant before. It works. Cleanly. No error, no contradiction, no sense that you've broken a rule by asking the question in reverse. Try it with a planet orbiting a star. Same result. Run the orbit forward, the math holds. Run it backward, the math holds exactly as well, tracing the same ellipse in reverse with no complaint. Try it with two particles colliding in a vacuum, exchanging energy the way particles do. Forward, backward. The physics doesn't care which way you watch the film. This is the part that unsettled me the first time I actually let it land, rather than just reading past it the way you read past a sentence in a textbook. None of the fundamental laws describing how matter moves and interacts, not gravity, not electromagnetism, not the equations governing individual particles, contain a direction. There is no term in any of them that means forward. No mathematical instruction that says events must proceed this way and not that way. The laws are, in the technical sense, time symmetric. They work both ways. They have never needed a way at all. And yet you have never once seen a shattered glass leap up off the floor and reassemble itself on a table. You have never watched smoke pour itself back down into a chimney. You have never seen an old man grow younger. Somewhere between the perfect symmetry of the underlying laws and the stubborn one-directionality of everything you've ever actually witnessed, a direction gets added. The equations don't supply it. Something else does. I've sat with physicists, or at least their papers, people who've spent entire careers trying to locate exactly where that direction comes from, and the closest anyone gets is back to the counting, back to entropy, back to the improbable tidiness of however things happen to start, back to the simple, almost anticlimactic fact that there are more ways to be scattered than to be arranged, and scattering is just more likely over and over at every scale until it looks, from where we're standing, like an unbreakable rule. But notice what that means if you let it sit long enough to actually mean something. The forward feeling, the one thing that has felt your entire life like the most basic and unquestionable fact of existence, was not written into the deepest description we have of how matter behaves. It was added, by probability, by the specific, contingent, unexplained condition of the universe at its beginning. Change that starting condition, and the equations wouldn't object even slightly to time running the other way. Physics has never been fully comfortable saying this plainly, and I understand why. It's one thing to say the ink spreads because there's more room for it to be spread than gathered. It's another thing to say the entire experience of your life moving forward, birth toward death, cause toward effect, hope toward memory, might be resting on the exact same shrug of an answer. Not a law, not a mandate handed down by the universe, a probability playing out at a scale so enormous it has never once, in the history of anything we've observed, gone the other way by accident. I keep turning this over and it keeps landing in the same uncomfortable place. Somewhere underneath the man aging, the glass staying broken, the smoke never returning to the chimney, there is no rule insisting it has to be this way. There is only an amount of room, an amount so vast that could theoretically reverse, and will never actually reverse, have become, for all practical purposes, the same sentence. The cooling continues. The kettle from the very start of this is long past cold now. Whatever water was left in it sitting at whatever temperature the room has settled into, indistinguishable at this point from any other still water anywhere. It was never really the kettle. You probably guessed that a while ago. It was just a small, ordinary place to stand while something larger got taken apart around it. Here, finally, is the fact I held back from the beginning, because it needed the rest of this to make any sense at all. The moment of boiling and the moment of stillness sitting on the counter now, in the deepest description physics has managed to produce, the one built from equations that don't privilege a present, that don't contain a forward, that treat every moment as equally real and equally present in the block. Those two moments are not separated by anything moving between them. Nothing flows from one into the other. There is no current, no river, no passage happening in the background while you weren't looking. There are simply two arrangements, existing, the way both ends of a rope exist without one end travelling into the other. You've been picturing a river the whole time. It may always have been a rope. I don't know how to end this more honestly than to say I'm not sure that fact resolves anything. It doesn't cancel the ink spreading, or the mountain clock ticking faster than the basement one, or the ache of trying to hold on to this exact instant and finding your hand closed on nothing, again, the way it always closes on nothing. Those are all still true. The arrow made of probability, the local clocks disagreeing, the memory sitting in your skull doing its best impression of a window into the past. None of that goes away just because the deepest layer underneath it doesn't seem to need a river to make it work. Maybe what changes, if anything changes at all, is smaller than an answer. Maybe it's just this, the forward feeling, the one you've trusted since before you had words for it, might not be something time is doing to you. It might be something you are doing, quietly, continuously, the way a body keeps a heartbeat without being told to. Not evidence of a current in the universe, evidence of a particular kind of pattern, the kind that remembers, that ages, that counts, moving through a landscape that may not be moving at all. I don't know if that's true. I've read enough to know that people much better equipped than I am to answer this still don't agree with each other, some standing inside the block without discomfort, others certain something essential is still missing from the picture, a piece nobody has found yet. The water in the kettle is still. The room is quiet in the particular way a room gets quiet after a sound has stopped, not before one starts. Nothing here is resolving into an answer, and I don't think it's supposed to. You are sitting wherever you are sitting, in whatever you've been calling now, and that's the whole thing, really. Not a conclusion, just a place we've arrived at together, the two of us, in the last of the steam,